You're listening to KRUU-LP 100.1 FM, the voice of Fairfield, Iowa. My name is Dennis Ramundi. My show is Speaking Freely. My co-host today is Sundar Raman, and our guest today is Senator Barack Obama, running for president, running for the nomination of the Democratic Party. Welcome to the show, Senator.
Thank you so much for having me.
First question, how do you differ from Senator Edwards and Clinton on how you would manage the war in Iraq if you were elected?
Well, obviously part of the difference is that I wouldn't have gone in the first place. And back in 2002, as I was preparing to run for the United States Senate, I stood before 3,000 people in Chicago and gave a speech indicating that this would be a bad idea. And in fact, the speech is posted on my website, barackobama.com. People can take a look. At that time, my assessment was there was not an imminent threat, that this would fan the flames of anti-American sentiment, that it would distract us from the legitimate goals of dealing with Al-Qaeda, and that we would have an occupation of undetermined length at undetermined costs with undetermined consequences. So that obviously speaks to how I applied my judgment to previous foreign policy issues. At this point, there are no good options in Iraq. I think all Democrats at this point believe that we need to end the war. I think we have to end it as carefully as we were careless getting in. We have some responsibilities to the Iraqi people. We have to make sure that there's not complete chaos there. But I proposed back in January a phased redeployment with a timetable of having our combat troops out by March 31st of next year. And I've been consistent, not only in my opposition to the war, but in bringing a responsible end to this war so we can start initiating diplomacy and moving forward and getting out from under the cloud that has damaged our relations all around the world.
Well, let's bring it back to home base a little bit. One of the big things that's in the news about the current administration is their violation of constitutional privacy through the NSA wiretaps, collusion with private entities to actually do this. What are your thoughts on it, and how would you prevent something like this and hold these people accountable for violation of constitutional rights?
Well, at the outset, it's important for, I think, your listeners to know that I taught constitutional law for 10 years at the University of Chicago. So this is something that obviously that I care deeply about. One of my top priorities is to restore a balance between our legitimate security concerns and the most fundamental values that we hold, which are that individual rights matter. I believe that we should completely review the Patriot Act and eliminate those provisions that are encroaching on people's constitutional rights without any good cause. I think that we have to have a court system that oversees what the executive branch is doing, because one of the problems in this administration has been its complete contempt for the basic principle of checks and balances. We saw it most recently with Dick Cheney essentially claiming that he wasn't even a member of the executive branch, that he had a whole new branch of his own that nobody had ever heard of. I think that it's going to be important for us to close Guantanamo and restore habeas corpus to signify to the world that we're going to live up to those core ideals that were on display after World War II when we set up the Nuremberg courts, that even those people who have engaged in enormous damage still have to be accorded basic due process rights.
Senator, 2.2 million Americans are incarcerated. African Americans make up about 13% of the population, yet 43% of those incarcerated approximately are African American. It's at a tremendous cost to the U.S. taxpayer. What would you do to reform the prisons and the justice system in the United States?
Well, the place to start is to make sure that young people aren't getting in trouble in the first place and aren't having to engage in the drug trade. And that means that we're investing in early childhood education, that we're investing in a school system and our teachers so that young people are learning, that we've got after school and summer school programs that give them constructive activities. The more that we can catch young people early, particularly low-income and poor children, and give them a sense of a broader horizon, the less likely they are to engage in criminal activity. I also think that it's important to recognize that nonviolent drug offenders, which has been the fastest growing category, should be treated as part of a public health problem, and that opportunities for us to use drug courts and other diversion strategies so that we're not sending them to jail where they get a master's degree in criminality, but instead refocus their attention on positive ways of living, I think is absolutely critical.
A significant portion of the military complex right now is outsourced. We have a lot of private contractors, but we have an increasing responsibility around the world, both militarily and humanitarian-wise. How are you planning on kind of tackling those issues with a dwindling percentage of people signing up to become members of the military, and yet at the same time increasing our responsibilities around the world?
Well, I think it's important for us to not be fooled that private contracting is somehow a answer to our security issues or our budget issues. I mean, the fact of the matter is that when we've got organizations like Blackwater in Iraq that aren't accountable, one of the basic premises of our military has always been that it's accountable to civilian control, and that it's responsible to us and our values and our ideals in a way that private contractors may not be. It also isn't cheaper. I mean, when you have a private contractor who's making 10 times the amount of money that a infantryman in the Army is making, that's not fair to the person who's laying their lives on the line on behalf of this country. And so I'm very disturbed by this general trend. It's not restricted, by the way, to our military. We're seeing the same thing in the CIA where, and many branches of government where we have diminished our commitment to the civil service. People then leave for the private sector. They charge back our government twice as much as they would be if we valued civil servants. And one of the roles, I think, of the next president is restoring that sense that public service is a noble profession, that it's not designed to get rich, but it has its own, for you to get rich, but it has its own rewards. One of the things that I've said is that anybody who wants to work in the Obama administration, you're not going to be able to lobby after you leave this Obama administration, because this revolving door between the private sector and the government sector, I think, has undermined that sense of accountability in government that's so important.
Final question, Senator. You're in a very close race now with Senators Clinton, Senator Edwards. Public wants to know, why you, Senator, as opposed to those two senators?
Well, I respect both those senators and the other candidates in the field. I made a decision to run because I have a track record of being able to bridge some of the divisions, racial, religious, regional, partisan divisions that have prevented our country from coming together and to get things done. I've been able to put forward a progressive agenda while still appealing to independents and still appealing to some moderate Republicans. And I think that gives me the ability to build this sort of working consensus, the majority consensus, that's necessary for us to move forward on issues like healthcare or our environment, climate change. Those are all tough issues, and we're not going to be able to engage in the traditional politics where one side's on 45% of the country and the other side's 45% of the country, and we're just battling for the 10% of swing voters. We've got to have the capacity to come together with a sense of common purpose that's been missing for too long.
Senator, thank you very much. Again, you're listening to KRUU-LP 100.1 FM, the voice of Fairfield, Iowa. My name is Dennis Ramundi. My show is Speaking Freely. My co-host today is Sundar Raman, and our guest today is Senator Barack Obama. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
I had a wonderful time. Thank you.
And we'd like to give you